on balance and collaboration. And I'll just tell you a bit more about that in a minute. Here's me, as I just funny, but the bit I'm most proud about is that obviously my children, but I'm also managing to incorporate a lot more of my meditation and stuff and my spiritual practices into my coaching. So I did a talk the other day on spiritual intelligence, and I'm starting to enjoy that sort of thing. So I can talk about that another time. But today, I'm going to talk about the balance of self-organizing teams and leadership. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jerry Weinberg, but he came up with this model called the MOI Model, and we're going to go through that. And then we're going to talk about that model from the position of observing interactions and balancing interventions. So based on his model, sort of come up with this tool that you can use to coach leaders with to help them observe. In fact, you coach, we'll go more into that later. So that's kind of what the session is about. So if you didn't come here for this, now's the time. So who leads a self-organizing team? Let's see. Everyone, the team, the whole team. The point is they don't need a leader and a clear and understood vision. Good. So we've got a diverse range of things, but team seems to be the most prominent one. And the reason I ask that is because I'm going to define what I mean first. So this quote from scrum.org seemed to fit the bill for me. Self-organizing teams choose how best to accomplish their work rather than being directed by others outside. So the idea is they're empowered and they have enough things going on for them so that they can just get on with it. And what I mean by leadership, Esther Darby's done some lovely work, and there's a link there on the MOI stuff that I'm going to talk about too, but she says leadership is creating an environment where everyone can contribute to the problem at hand. So what she's implying there is that leadership can happen at all levels, all of the time. So if we think about leadership in some ways, if the founder's still involved with a company, they probably have strong impact on the leadership, and they're probably directing a lot more things that are going on in the early stages, maybe longer term. Managers, they're in a role where they are leading, whether that's right or wrong, or whether they are doing it right or wrong, but they are in a position where they may be leading teams, team members and team members. So if we think about it, anybody at any time could be leading a certain thing based on their skills or whatever's going on for the group. And maybe at times you might have a team coach pop in, but you wouldn't want the reliance on leadership constantly, because obviously they get stuck in the team or around the team. So fundamentally, what I'm talking about when I say leadership is where anybody could take the lead and sort of get stuff done. Now, I'm also going to probably tell you a bit of my journey and why I've brought this to the meetup, for example. So I think about self-organizing leadership and the balance between, in my experience, I was a manager and I just came towards Agile, and it was about how did I learn about what to do and balancing, getting the right level of balance to make self-organization work. So back in 2008, I think that's when I started finding out about Agile. I was head of engineering for about 12 people. I'd started off as a coder, and like 10 years on, I was, I'd moved up, or not up's the right way. I'd guess I was earning more money, not necessarily doing what I wanted to do, but there was an opportunity for me to earn more money, so I took it as a manager. And I was finding it hard to work out what was going on. So team, one of the guys would say, yeah, this is 10% done, this is 50% done, and the next day it was down to 30%, and it all had this times 12 people, and I was getting in a right old mess. So Rob started, he's involved in the early Kanban movement. He came and started introducing me to Kanban. But one of the other things he introduced me to was this book, and it was called Becoming a Technical Leader. So what was happening for me at that time was I was losing my coding skills because I was getting more involved in more of the higher level stuff. And I also didn't feel like I was doing a very good job of being a manager, because I still wanted to get involved in the day-to-day, and I didn't know what to do. And so this book was the starting point to help me think about, how do I let the team get on, and how do I help them, and what do I need to do? And this is where the MOI model came. So it wasn't until after I read it that I noticed the book was from 1986. So almost 20 years later, it's not that, 15 years later, I don't know, whatever the maths is on that, whatever I just said, 20 years, yeah. I was reading this book and I was finding useful insight in it. And I actually wrote to Jerry and said how amazing and how helpful I'd found it. And he actually passed away 2 years ago, but if you look up some of his later work, there's some really great stuff around. So where am I going with this? I was introduced to Agile and the proposition of self-organizing teams, but my current role had been a kind of a Super Mario, stop things going wrong, organize the work, tell everyone, make sure I knew the code base inside out. So this is where I was, and now I'm sort of thinking, well, okay, what do I need to do? I need to step back and let the team organize themselves. So I did, and then what was happening was that they were struggling. They were making lots of mistakes, and I was getting into trouble, or I was saying, why weren't these things happening? I was getting pressure put back on me. So then I'd start going back and I'd be intervening, going, hold on a minute, come on, we need to stop these things. And then they'd be saying, no, hold on, we're self-organizing, you should leave us alone. Okay. So I was in this real struggle for a little while, because I really wanted to move forward with Agile, but I just didn't know, I didn't know what to do. And so this is a quote that was evident to me at the time. I didn't know about it, but being managed by someone else is totally ingrained in our life and our work experience. Why should we expect that when we tell a team it's responsible for managing itself, it will know what to do? It will know what we're talking about. So I assumed if I give them the reins, and they're really bright guys, that I could let them just get on with it. But the problem was, we all had lots of fear, because I was getting into trouble. I was perhaps behaving in a very pleasant way, and those guys were trying to tell me, get lost, we're self-organizing, but they didn't necessarily have the right things going on. So what was in this book was something called the MOI model, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about that. And there's two perspectives from this. So it's a model primarily to describe the key ingredients for leadership and team to be successful. So from an observation perspective, we would look and see what things are missing. And from an intervention perspective, we would look at it from how we go about dealing with the observation that we've seen. So I'll talk about that more later, but we're going to start off with just the observation. So the M in MOI is for motivation. So if I observe, I might, as a leader or someone outside or inside the team, let's talk about it from my perspective at the time as a manager. I might observe the motivation in the team. And so motivation, I mean the trophies, troubles, push-pull, the things that basically get them going, things that make them want to get on with their work. Okay, so that can manifest as an observation in two ways. They could have too much motivation. So for example, I was working with some user research guys once, and they were like spending all this time creating all these UX designs as well, and they had tons of ideas and great, and the product owner sort of said, well, we're only going to spend a week on this. So they were so motivated to create all these designs, but they hadn't really thought about the fact that this is a tiny piece of work. And so the opposite of that is too little motivation. We could observe something not getting done because no one wants to do it. Something that's boring, or someone they didn't care about it, or it's a bit mundane. So I might observe the team is lacking motivation or having too much motivation. So that's the first M. Okay. O is for organization. So this is about referring to the existing structure to enable the work to get done. So if there's too much organization, then it's very hard for the team to get things done. Okay, so for example, the team, when I worked somewhere once, the team would basically have to go through a whole CAB process. So to release one line of code would take about 2 weeks. They'd have to get on the list, and then we'd have to send someone in. Loads of people would have to talk about how they knew nothing about this group, but they had to approve it, and you had to get all these other people to approve it. And then once that had happened, we could release some software. So if we're observing the team can't get things done, it may be internal or it may be external. They've put their own rules around something, but if there's too much, then they're going to get really stuck. And if there's too little, then things could be getting missing. We could be losing quality, or if people don't know who's doing what, and timelines could get missed and all sorts of things. So again, as a manager at the time, for me, I'm observing too much or too little of something as what's going on with the team. If there's something they're lacking. Information, ideas, innovation. So these are the ideas, facts and theories and the hypotheses to carry out the work. So if the team are lacking information, then they can't get something done. So the model is quite simple. M for motivation, they're lacking it or they've got too much. O is for organisation, they've got too much or too little. This is what I'm observing. I, they're lacking the information to get things done. So by observing these would then maybe determine when an intervention would happen. But what we're sort of saying in this part of the model is, if the team have the right level of all of these, then they can self-organize much easier. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms for a minute. I'm going to give you some scenarios, and I want you to just try and categorize them, to have a little chat about what the thing is and decide what it is what is lacking. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you 2 examples actually. So you're going to have I'm going to send you a link for slides in a minute, and you're going to be able to edit the PowerPoint. It's like a PowerPoint sort of tool, Google Slides. And so I want you to take these boxes and drag them where you think. So for example, the team are finding it hard to book a room for a meeting. So we could say that if they're finding it hard, that the organisation, they're struggling with the organisation. It's not set up right. So there's not enough rooms, so they can't book it, for example. So I'm observing that this is hard for them to get organised around. And so in this scenario, everyone's in a breakout room for this exercise, but no one knows what they're supposed to be doing. I might say, okay, well then they're lacking information. So I haven't given the right amount of information for anyone to make a decision on where this should go. Okay, so in your room, in your groups, I would like you to review the different observations that you get and then just drag it in. And we're going to have 2 breakout rooms. Is it 2 now, Tom, or would someone from each group like to just share something on behalf of the group? So anyone from group 1 like to share anything that happened or that they found as they were doing it? You might need to unmute yourself to tell me about it. I haven't crashed, have I, again? No, there's no one want to talk about what happened in room 1.
I'd say room 1 being very quiet.
They are, aren't they? Okay. Or does anyone from room 2 like to say anything? Anyone like to say anything about anything?
Sorry. Okay. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk about the details in the first group, if that's useful.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know where everyone else is. Is everyone else back from the room? Because it was awfully quiet.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, they are back.
They are back. Jack, thank you. I appreciate you volunteering to speak. So,
okay.
Yeah. Anything you want to share or what happened?
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'll try and play back what we discussed as a group, and if you're listening in, please chirp in if I get any of this wrong. I was actually, my first thoughts to this was I thought we'd be finished a lot quicker than I thought it'd be easy. I thought we could do all 5 slides in all fairness, but when reading the questions, I think we realized that some of them, I think there was only 1 or 2 that were quite obvious, and the rest of them were quite tricky, as although we came to an agreement more or less, and you can see how we've laid things out, there was a question around some of these where some of them could be sort of in the middle between motivation and organization. We felt that I think there was a few comments made at the end around if the motivation's there, then they'd have the motivation to perhaps fix some of the organization problems. And I think it was a case of, is it the cart before the horse and things like that. And we spoke about potential context behind some of these and the influence that made to our decisions. But this is essentially how we've laid it out, with only the one task there being never seems to be done because no one wants to do it. And then the other three being around the organization. I don't think there was any disagreements within the group, really.
No, that's fine. And so this isn't about being right or wrong either. Okay. So thank you for sharing, Jack. Anyone in room 2 want to share anything? Thank you very much. Anything? I mean, it wasn't. They were quite similar if you look at it. So anyone from room 2? How did you find the exercise, or what happened as you were going through it?
Well, I clearly have OCD the way I've lined them up.
Perfect. Me too. Look, I organised it so that you could.
It was quite fun because we actually finished ours before room 1 did, so we were kind of watching theirs and going, they've got a gap. Oh, they didn't give them a gap. There were a few that could have gone, motivation one, we could have gone in different ways, but we kind of decided as the group where it seemed to fit for us as the most logical with information available. But there's some where if you sort of dived into it and had more information, you might decide it's on one of the slightly different bits.
Sure.
Yeah, I was about to say that was the big takeaway for me actually, was that on the surface they seem to be exactly one thing, but if you kind of started to think about it a bit more, it might be the observation that you took to get to this step, or the context at which this is recorded that might be the problem as much as the actual thing itself.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, that's brilliant. I'm going to move on. So we'll come to the next bit, which is more interesting for me anyway. Let's see if you find it interesting. So, okay. So in this exercise, we were literally looking at what, and you weren't doing it physically, obviously, but based on a small amount of information, you were making an assumption about what was lacking. And so, and that's the part here. So if as a manager, I might be observing these things and making lots of assumptions about what's wrong or about what needs to change. And what would that lead to? Well, ultimately it would lead to maybe me making an intervention. So if you think about what I was talking about before, I'm just new into being a manager. That's what it was called at the time, dev manager, right? And I don't really know, I'm just doing it because I wanted to earn a bit more money. And I think, oh yeah, I know everything about this code base and these guys like me and that sort of thing. We can do this. But as I'm now becoming more responsible for these things, I'm starting to see things that aren't right. And if we then think about it from the perspective of, but Agile's here and I'm supposed to let them self-organize, I now have to think about, okay, what am I going to do to solve it? So this is where I got out of balance, and this is how someone helped me deal with this. So this is the second part about this is about intervention. Okay, so J is the extra letter. It's not talked about in the early version of the book, but it comes out later on. So we've got motivation, organization, information, and Jiggle. So we'll talk more about Jiggle in a minute. So this is now we're talking through the lens of, I've observed this, now what am I going to do as an intervention? And this could be me as a manager, or it could be any leader, or it could be the founder, or it could be a team lead in a team, it could be anybody who's making an intervention, okay? But this as a coaching tool is what I'm interested in sharing with you. So I'll just talk through the letters first then. So M is for motivation. So if I observe something, a lack or too much motivation or organization or lack of information, then my reaction or an intervention might be to motivate the team. So I might give them encouragement, praise or feedback, or I might give them empathy and say, oh, that's really sad. Let's see if we can get this thing sorted and have a caring attitude. And my intervention may or may not increase their motivation. So just because I think I'm going to motivate them doesn't actually mean I do. But that's what the M stands for. And organization from, so again, we're talking from an intervention perspective. So if I'm the leader, I might start to organize the team. I might make arrangements for them. I might set up resources. I might put new structures in. I might get them extra support. That's the sort of thing that we could do as an intervention based on what we've observed. Okay, information. So I might then provide them with the facts or the theories, the tips or tricks or the hypotheses to get them going again. So if this is what I observed something, these are the 3 things that I could do. And the final one is jiggle. Okay, so this is the idea of a jiggle, is that they're just stuck and a little something's needed to get them moving again. So I could say, so what could you do to make this worse? Or how could we, what advice would you give yourselves in order to solve this problem? So keep these headings in mind, and we'll go into more detail in a minute. I'll just check the chat in case anyone's asking me something. Oh no, it's okay. Right. So, so this is how I got introduced to this model again. So I think I mentioned in 2010 or 2008, my friend introduced me to that book. I'm now a few years into my Agile journey, and these 2 chaps came in to help me. So I didn't have much option for help. So I would just sort of get small amounts of money, and then I'd bring a coach in for a day every couple of months and say, can you come and help me with some things? This time, Sean and Ian came. So these guys didn't know I'd read this book and didn't actually, they'd just done some work with Jerry, so they kind of knew more about him than I did, which I didn't know at the time, and I'd forgotten all about the MOI. And so what they asked me to do was record a load of things that I'd done. So they came in this 1 week, and then a couple of weeks later they came back, and in that time they asked me to note down all the things I'd done and so all the things I'd seen and then what I did about it. Okay, so here's how that model would look. Okay, so down the left hand side we've got what we observe, which you've just done in your groups, and then we've got the option for an intervention. So what they were asking me then to do was plot it again, what I observed and then what I did. So for example, if I observed, and I've matched these, but they don't have to be to the same things. It doesn't have to be motivation to motivation. I could, if I spotted something that needed organizing, I could use motivation as well. So let's just go through that as an example. So as the leader, a task never seemed to get done because no one wanted to do it. So I might say to them, I'll tell you what, if you guys will get this done, I'll buy you a load of beers, or if you guys don't get this done, I'll tell the customer that we're in trouble, and they'll come have to speak to you directly, or something like that. I could motivate them positively or negatively. If the team's release process takes 3 days, the whole team are involved in all of it. They work through endless forms and spreadsheets, right? So something I could do is say, right, guys, we're going to get some experts in, and we're going to learn TDD and BDD, and we're going to start automating it. Or I'll work with you all. I'll set out this new process for you to test things, or we make the spreadsheets faster or something. So if that would be an example of me observing an organization and then going and organizing it for them. An example of information might be the acceptance criteria isn't clear on each piece of work. So what do? I just fill in the acceptance criteria for you because I've got the information. So that would be an example. This isn't real, by the way. These are just examples based on what you had. So if what we then do is we talk to the leader and we coach them, and we sort of say, okay, well, if you're always doing these things, maybe you're not empowering the team, or maybe you're spending that much time on them that you don't have time for anything else. So let's take a look at what happened for me. So and this is the key reason why I wanted to introduce you to it. So when I did this exercise, they plotted this, and this is the original one from back in about 10 or 10 years ago or so. I was pretty much going and organizing everything. So I was quite proud of myself. I was like, yeah, I didn't know this was a bad thing. And they were saying to me, right, well, how are the team ever going to get empowered if you're organizing things for them? And clearly you're not letting them self-organize because you're doing all this stuff for them. And so now I can see this is really out of balance. There's a coaching opportunity for me to say, well, okay, well, what do I need to change? So this is the turning point for me, where I start to realize what's really happening. So I'm in fear of that if they're doing all this stuff that I won't have a job. I'm in fear that I'm going to get told off if they're not doing all these things. So actually, what do I need to do differently? And this is where the coaching for me came in, to help me understand about how to do things differently. And if you look down the bottom there, there's MOI and there's an X. So that column there is where I didn't observe anything. So I didn't observe anything, and I still went ahead and organized things. So this is really like a point for me to step back and sort of make some different changes in my life. And so fundamentally what happened for me was I did manage to change my ways, and I did go head first into lots of different things and ways of learning and getting coached, to the point where a year later I went up and set the organization up in America. And because I'd given this all away to everyone, I had much more space. So it was an opportunity for me to realize the impact of how the coaching around this can work. I've subsequently used it with other leaders when they are saying they don't have time, and we plot these things out and we're saying, well, look, how long does it take you to, you're constantly giving out information. So why is it they can't get this information? Or is it that you're afraid to give your power away? Or if you're constantly organizing things, you're not going to be scalable. You won't be able to do other things. And if you're just solely motivating people, then you may be out of touch with what's really going on, or you may not have the right knowledge. So maybe you need to get more involved and find out what sort of things the teams are really dealing with and help them differently. So if we look at those before, so my motivation would have been a task never seems to get done. I would have rolled my sleeves up and just gone in and coded it, because I still knew how to code at that point. The team release took 3 days, so I organized the team to make it take quicker. There was no information, I gave them the information. So that was what I was doing. That's how I needed to change. And so, as I say, this tool is a way of just holding the mirror up to someone you're working with and getting them to see where they're too heavy in certain areas, so that you can coach them around the change that they might want to make. And that's it, really. So what Jerry's saying is, if you start to be aware of these constraints for the things that could be holding back a team, or your tendency to go and interact in a certain way, then you can get much better at and more skillful about how you interact and how you balance your interventions with a self-organizing team. So it's more of a supportive role rather than a command and control role. And that's about that for now. So after this session, I'll drop, I've got a infographic with just a high level of this, which I'll put on the LinkedIn page. Feel free to go on there and download it. And apart from that, is there any questions or anything that anyone would like to know about? Is there anyone on mute who'd like to ask me a question?
When you're introducing this to the team, sorry, it's Lisa speaking.
Hi, Lisa.
I'll switch on my camera, it's nicer. When you're introducing this to the team, like how long would you spend kind of doing the intro and explaining what we're doing?
Okay, so if you're going to use this with the team, then the observation part is useful for them to help identify what it is they need. And so that part there is really about them. So you can just use that part of it, which is the exercise you guys did.
Yeah.
So what, in terms of which part specifically were you on about introducing?
Where you had your last bit on the wall. So you would do like, I mean, the intro is probably only about 10 minutes. I'm trying to, like, if I was scheduling a session and I'm like,
okay,
you know what I mean? Yeah. Like a workshop around, identifying where our problems are.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. So you just go through those headings, that's right, and you can just sort of get some example. Maybe you can observe some first, or maybe you can
Yeah.
pull some out of a retrospective. So get things out
Mm-hmm.
of a few retrospectives over a couple of weeks, a couple of sprints, and then ask them about this, and then they can start understanding what it is for themselves. So yeah, it probably only 10, 15 minutes. It wouldn't take too long. And you can test
Great.
it with them. And also, you may not agree with what they put, but that's okay, right? The idea is this for them.
That's a good
If
point.
that's how they see it, you've got an opportunity to give some reflection in a different way. Thank you,
Okay,
Lisa.
thank you.
Did that answer your question, by the way?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Okay.
No, but you're right. I think that's one of the things about, you know, being the facilitators is it's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's making sure that something happens and we're capturing it.
Sure. And in the exercise we did, I could have been more specific, but that's the point, right? The team may all have different opinions on this as well. So then you've even got some great coaching opportunities. So someone might think, well, you're just not motivated to do that. And the other person's going, well, no, I haven't got enough information to do that, right? And that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you can collect the data without telling them about this first, it's so that they're not sort of trying to preempt where it goes beforehand. You just get some raw data and then give it back to them. So like I say, when I was doing it, I was all excited. I'm going, yeah, look at all these things I've done. I was like, my ego was right up there going, yeah, I've organized this and I'll fix that, without realizing that was what the problem was. And maybe if I'd known that, I might not have recorded some or been as candid as I was.
Okay,
Especially
thanks.
the ones where there was no organization needed and I organized things. Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Lisa. Is there
Thank
any
you.
other questions or any comments or anything else anyone else wants to say? Okay.
I have a comment to make. Just a thank you more than anything. Thank you for sharing a great story from a long time ago. How do you remember such a long time back? And you've even got photo evidence as well. So this must have really made an impact at some point, right? For you to have taken a photo of that for future reference.
Well, the truth is, it really hurt actually, and because I didn't. It wasn't that I was intending to command and control. There was lots of external pressures for me, and obviously the teams. By the time I did that post, that picture, I actually had 25 developers, and there was all sorts of things going on, but it was hard for me to. My problem was I was like, how can I get more people? How can we have more teams if I can't fix all these things quick enough? And I think I see this pattern in several ways. It's either that I felt like I was almost like a founder in that business. I was employee number 2 or 3. Everything, I'd been there the whole time, so I was really quite tied to it. But you also see this with manager roles where they're the teams have been self-organizing, and there's fear because they think they're not going to have a job to do anymore, or that so they start to stop things, and so there's the fear is ridiculous. I can really, when I see it, I can really relate to it, because I started to think, well, what is my job if the team is self-organizing? And these roles are in businesses all the time, and like I say, my motivation for taking that role was because I wanted to buy a house or whatever else was going on for me at the time, not because I wanted to be a manager. And quite often HR is set up in that way that if you do better, you earn more money, and then, oh, I can't earn any more money as a developer, I need to do something else. And so all of these things help me have such empathy for the difficult behaviors that I can observe, or the challenges that people are facing. And this lens of helping them think about it, or somebody saying, I haven't got time for this because, and then clearly it's something in here, and you say, well, if you don't organize that and you basically give them the information to do themselves, you'll have all this extra time to help work with me, sort the teams out or do something else. So yeah, it was really painful, but it's actually a great story to tell because of how much impact it had on me. Yeah, I just waffled on there, didn't I? Has anyone got anything else to say? Sorry, I'll just shut up now and let everyone have their tea, or I'm going to have mine. Okay, well, Tom, back over to you, mate. I don't know, actually, I think that's it. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.